On an early morning in Alabama, a 32-year-old Army veteran would be shot and killed in front of his home while leaving for work. But who could have committed such an unthinkable act towards who everyone knew as a family man working a 9-to-5? Why have decades passed with no justice? And why is this killer or killers still walking free among us?
Still no answers.
9 years ago today,
What happened to these two young children?
remains a mystery.
Urgent story unfolding right now. Who is missing? An unsolved murder.
"32-year-old Eric Bernard Nelams was born June 10th of 1971. To his mother Annie, Eric was said to have around 15 siblings, but was mainly raised with his sister Kathy, and the two were closer than anything in the world, and grew up in Columbus, Georgia, a city in western Georgia along the border of Alabama, the Chattahoochee River separating it from Phenix City. Eric was a big family person. Family meant everything to him, and he always wanted to make his family happy. Christmas was his favorite holiday, which wasn't a surprise since it meant the whole family got together at their grandmother's house. They gather around the table, eat and dance, and enjoy everyone's company. As a child, Eric played baseball for the local community baseball team, who thought he was too small to play, and he proved them wrong. Because even though he was short, he had a big personality. He loved sports and was an avid fan of the Georgia Bulldogs, Atlanta Falcons, and the Atlanta Braves. He was also fascinated with computer technology, playing all different games and trying to master them. He would probably be pretty stoked with how far gaming has come in the last decades. He was said to be so curious that he had taken an Atari apart and tried to put it back together, and as a teen, he graduated from Carver High School in 1989. After graduating from high school, Eric began taking classes at DeVry University in Atlanta, Georgia, his studies focusing mainly on technology. But the school cost was said to be too great to maintain Eric attending, so he later had to withdraw. He then joined the United States Army to help provide a stable lifestyle for himself. He was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, Fort Campbell in Kentucky, followed by going overseas to Germany. He also served in the Persian Gulf War. After returning back to the U.S., Eric trained at Fort Benning in Georgia and was part of the elite airborne school. Even with all of that going on, Eric often took trips to spend time with his sister Kathy. The two were close in age, so even as adults, they did life together. Kathy going as far to say that Eric was her best friend. At the time, Kathy was a single mother who worked overnights at the ER, so Eric often stepped in to help her raise the kids. To his niece and nephew, Eric was known as a fun, helpful uncle to the point of being a father figure and positive role model. Eric's sister Kathy saying, quote, "He was such a charismatic person, very lovable and personable. He was the biggest family man I knew. Whatever I couldn't get for my children, Eric always helped out and supplemented for us." End quote. In 1994, Eric would get married to his first wife, and together they had a son named Antonio. The couple later divorced in 1999, his ex-wife taking Antonio, but Eric stayed in his son's life. Eventually, he left the military and remarried a woman named Molly, who had 2 children of her own. The family settled in Phenix City, Alabama in 2003. Eric bought a home in a cul-de-sac at 2300 Level Court, a suburban area located off U.S. Highway 280. He was said to be deeply dedicated to his family, those closest to him saying that whoever Eric was in a relationship with, he treated their children like they were his own. Eric both cared and loved so hard. He was deeply loved. It would be in the early hours of the morning on Friday, September 26th of 2003, that Eric was scheduled to work. He woke up, got ready, and walked outside of his home, but he wouldn't make it to work. Shortly after walking outside and heading to the carport, which was just steps away from his door, gunshots would ring throughout the cul-de-sac. Molly would call 911, authorities arriving on scene between 5:30 to 5:40 a.m., and they would find Eric suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. And sadly, he would not survive, being pronounced dead at the scene. Very early on in the investigation, after authorities looked at Eric's body as well as his vehicle and realized nothing had been stolen, a robbery gone wrong was quickly ruled out. Latent fingerprints along with bullet casings were collected at the scene. However, over 20 years later, this case is still not solved. After authorities began questioning neighbors and witnesses, they would end up finding one witness who had watched the entire scene play out. The woman would recall watching two suspects perpetrate the crime before running back to a black vehicle and fleeing the scene. Authorities at the time would say that there were multiple suspects and that these suspects could have watched Eric's home from the street, where they were waiting for him to leave for work. His sister Kathy made a good point when she said that only Eric's close family and friends knew where he lived. That's a very important fact to consider. So they believed at the time that there was more to this story. Kathy telling the media, quote, "My brother didn't deserve that. He wasn't, as they say, in the streets or anything like that. He worked every day. He worked a 9 to 5. He was a family man." End quote. When you look at the location where Eric's home was, it was straight down the cul-de-sac from the adjoining street, which was Builder Drive. Meaning after shooting Eric, his killers would have only had to drive around a minute or so away to hit the highway, which would take them anywhere in the state or even cross the country. But family had a theory of their own, which involved a married couple named Stephanie and Eric Cowling. Eric had actually known the couple since childhood. Stephanie had worked as a line haul manager at a trucking company called Excel Direct Incorporated, but had been fired in 2002 for performance-related problems. She was then hired by the company DHL as a domestic manager. Now, it would turn out that while Stephanie was working at DHL, her and her husband Eric Cowling had actually roped Eric into an embezzlement scheme. This happened after Eric Cowling asked Eric to get involved, and he finally agreed. The plan was for Stephanie to set Eric up as a fake vendor and process fake payments in his name. He would then cash the checks, keep a small cut, and hand over the rest to Stephanie and her husband Eric Cowling. And the couple was allegedly doing this with at least 5 other individuals as well. Now, this scheme, once it came to light, was something that the family just didn't understand why Eric had gotten involved with. Eric wasn't the kind of person who would get involved with stuff like that. But in the end, they summed it up that he must have wanted to provide for his family. He's seen other people such as Stephanie and Eric Cowling who weren't struggling, and he just wanted to thrive and not have to, go paycheck to paycheck and struggle with bills. But that plan would fall apart after DHL would run an audit and notice the missing funds. Between both companies, it would turn out that the couple had stole more than $453,000. And with the scheme now exposed, the couple was facing serious legal issues. And it would turn out that all of this came to light just days before Eric's murder. Just days before he was shot to death in front of his home, DHL had outed the couple. And the Cowlings had actually tried to arrange a meeting with Molly and Eric so that they could all get their story straight. It's alleged that during this meeting, Stephanie had provided Eric and Molly with this paperwork that regarded, the trucking industry and trucking companies so that they could get familiar with some of that information. But they also tried to pressure Eric to take the blame, which he refused to. And then just days later, after refusing to take the blame for this fraud scheme, Eric winded up dead. But for one reason or another, there was no further investigation into that. A gun was also found in connection to this couple. However, as far as we also know, it was never tested in regards to Eric's case. To this day, as far as I know, and as far as it seems is known to the public, both Eric and Stephanie Cowling are not suspects in Eric's case. Both would end up facing charges for that fraud scheme, but eventually they were released, and as far as I know today, they are walking free. Now, as many of you all know, I am no stranger to covering cases where people are leading high-risk lifestyles that then either disappear or are found murdered. And just like any of those cases, it shouldn't matter that Eric got himself tied up in this fraud scheme. He was still a father, he was still a son, he was still a brother, he was still loved. Being a middleman in all of this should not have led him to being murdered in his driveway, especially if it was just over this money scheme. Because either way, the couple went to jail for it. It didn't deter, Eric's murder didn't deter that from happening. So if that's what it was for, it was all for nothing in the end. Eric deserved to watch his son grow up, and his son deserved to have his father in his life. As an adult, his son would also go into the military. And as you can see, he looks like the spitting image of his father. This is an accomplishment Eric should have been there for. And for some unknown reason, that was all taken away from everyone. And his killer or killers are still walking free on our streets today. So where is the justice in that?
I feel just like people have just pushed me around and told me lies about it. and all I want to know is the truth.
On September 26, 2003, Fort Benning soldier Eric Nelams was gunned down outside his home in Phenix City as he headed to work and his family slept inside.
My son's life was taken at his home. They had time to him. They knew what time he comes out to go to work, and he came out, they crank his truck up to go to work. And they was already there. And they just start shooting.
The 32-year-old's father's death has not been solved. Investigators say they've questioned several people with no luck cracking the case.
Basically, to my knowledge, no, there haven't been any change at the status of the case.
Head investigator Captain Frank Ivy says there haven't been many tips from witnesses.
We was able to rule out it being a robbery type situation or something like that, but anything else is still, we haven't been able to rule out anything else at this point in time.
Whittlesey says she believes someone close to her son took his life.
I have a good idea of who did this. As a mother, I have a sense of what happened. I don't believe friends are friends. Friends are not the friend that we think they are.
Captain Ivy proclaims he's not giving up on catching the killer.
Right now, it's somewhat of a senseless crime, and we would like to be able to say, yes, we was able to bring this person to justice.
10 years later, Eric's mother continues to plead to the community for help.
I want the mothers to speak to their sons and daughters. I'm a mother who lost my son, and there's other mothers. So I'm mainly speaking to a mother, just like I'm a mother. If you know anything, would you please come forward?
Eric's family has spent the last decades pleading for answers. Kathy saying, quote, "Come forward, have some compassion and empathy for our family. As you can see by my mom's reaction as well as mine earlier, it's still very raw. And you wouldn't think that after 20 years that it would be, but it is, especially because it's an unsolved case. He was a great person. He wasn't a street person. He was a person who was well loved and well liked. It just wasn't justified, and they took a major part of our family away, whoever was responsible. When you have such a big part of your family missing, it hurts. So that hurt begins to turn to frustration and anger. So you have to focus that on just anything positive, which is the justice that we're seeking now. But we deserve answers as a family, and we deserve some kind of closure. Above all else, we want closure." End quote. Now, Stephanie and Eric Cowling aren't the only, theorized suspects in this case. There is also a lot of speculation around Eric's wife, Molly. Before his murder, Eric had allegedly told family members that his marriage was falling apart and he wanted a divorce. The story goes that Molly left for a while and Eric changed the locks, but shortly before Eric's murder, about a week or so before his murder actually, Molly returned back. It's alleged that Molly also knew about this fraud scheme. As I mentioned, allegedly there was this meeting between Stephanie, Eric Cowling, and Eric and Molly, and she was in fear of being in trouble and getting arrested as well. So the question that people ask is, could she have also been involved in this murder scheme? I hope to hell not. But what we do know is that whoever ended up murdering Eric not only knew where he lived, but they also knew his schedule. They knew that he was going to leave at that specific time in the morning, would be alone, and that they could, facilitate the murder at that point. They were ready and waiting for him, and only so many people knew this information about him. On top of that, they were very easily able to get away, which tells me that they either knew this area or they studied this area so that they were able to do the hit and then escape without being caught. Now, at the end of the day, I'm sure there could be many other theories as to what could have happened to Eric, many other possibilities even, I'm sure. But when you really look at it, again, it's who knew where he lived, who knew his schedule, and some of these individuals would have known this stuff. Again, unless Eric had some other side scheme going on that no one knew about, where maybe he was involved with some shady individuals and they came and decided to kill him that day, I guess it's possible. But again, he would have had to be keeping that from everyone in his life. And it seems like this fraud scheme wasn't exactly that secret. So that makes me ask, how possible is it that it's some completely other thing than maybe the obvious? Despite Eric's case going cold over the years, A $10,000 reward would be offered for information by the Central Alabama Crimestoppers and Government KIV. In 2025, the fight for answers is still on, and his family has placed a billboard campaign in hopes of solving his murder. Eric's family has also started an online petition, pleading with Alabama's AG's cold case unit to lead Eric's homicide investigation. I'll have the link down below so that you can sign it. As I said, no matter what Eric was involved in, he still deserves justice. His family still deserves answers. And his killer or killers need to be held responsible. It's ridiculous that they have gotten away with this for over 2 decades.
He was a great person. He wasn't a street person. He was a person that was well loved and well liked.
It's still tough for the family of Eric Nelams to think back to the day more than 21 years ago when he was killed.
It just wasn't justified, and they took a major part of our family away, whoever was responsible. But we deserve answers as a family. We deserve some kind of closure.
His family says the 32-year-old was heading to work on September 26, 2003, when he was shot and killed in his driveway in Phenix City, Alabama. They say Eric grew up in Columbus, but recently moved to Alabama before his death.
When you have such a big part of your family missing, it hurts. So that hurts begins to turn into frustration and anger. So you have to focus that into something positive, which is the justice that we're seeking now.
All these years later, Eric's family is determined to find his killer, and they believe someone in Atlanta may know who's responsible. That's why they worked with Saban Outdoor to sponsor billboards along I-85 between Columbus and Atlanta, raising awareness about his case and the $10,000 reward for information leading to an arrest.
The more people you reach in a general area, the better chances you have, especially after so much time has passed and people have moved and transplanted to different places. Even if you move, you can't run from justice.
So if you have any tips or any information, please contact the authorities. I'll have that information in the description down below for the appropriate authorities to contact. And do you have any other information on this case? Do you have any other facts that I didn't find? Let's chat about it down below as well. I'll be in the comment section with you all. My heart goes out to Eric's family. This is a case that should have been solved a long time ago, yet here we are. Here they are, still fighting. And I truly, truly hope answers come soon. And as always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.